Tatsavitur Varenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Diyo Yona Prachodayat Om. Our salutations to that Supreme Being, who is the Self in all. He is the source and sustenance of this universe. In Him we live, move, and have our being. May He illumine our hearts, and may He guide us in every way. Om, peace, peace, peace. Good morning. My name is Swami Arupeshananda, and I'd just like to say before I begin, I'm very happy to be back in this temple. The last time I was scheduled to speak, I had to do it from the Mojave Desert for fear of the pandemic. And today, although the temple is not quite empty, it's close to empty, I'm still very glad to be here. It is a sign of progress, I think, for all of us. So the title of today's talk is A Prayerful Attitude. And I took the title from an exchange that happened in Boston between Swami Prabhavananda and some of his students. For those of you who don't know, Swami Prabhavananda was Swami Vivekananda's youngest disciple. He was given sannyas at the tender age of 17. And he was sent as a spiritual teacher by the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna to this country at the age of 22. It is said that he was born to bring Vedanta to the West. So the year this exchange occurred, I think, is about 1939 or 1940. World War II was just underway. And the spiritual community was sitting at the table, and a heated debate erupted about World War II. And there were various factions, some heavy words were thrown. Swami Prabhavananda sat silently. He didn't take any sides. He didn't say anything. And then later on, after things had cooled off, he said to the community in general that their behavior wasn't appropriate. He didn't single anyone out. He didn't take any sides, didn't point any fingers, call any names, but he said the behavior wasn't appropriate because this was a community of peace, and there was really no place for these kinds of heavy words to be thrown at each other. And he said something interesting by way of advice. He said, "Do not get entangled in the net of strong opinion. A prayerful attitude is the only solution for such times." So that's this idea of a prayerful attitude. I thought this was a very interesting way of thinking about strong opinions. They're a kind of gotcha for the spiritual aspirant. It is a net, something easy to be trapped by, something difficult to get out of. The net of strong opinion. And Swami Prabhavananda, of course, had an opinion about World War II. He was a pacifist. He was against, for him there was no bad guy or good guy. The bad guy was war. That was the bad guy. And so he had an opinion. And if you think about it, oh, well, thank you. I think I'll have some. What's wrong with being anti-war? How could that be bad? I mean, I think everyone wants peace at some level. Some people seem like they always want war. But I think that we can agree that that's because they feel that for whatever reason, peace is not a viable option. I think that only a deranged person actually prefers war to peace, all things being equal. And so the question arises, well, what's wrong with feeling strongly about this? What's wrong with having a strong opinion about peace? See, the idea isn't so much what the opinion is about. The idea that he is giving us is that strong opinions are a trap for the spiritual aspirant as such. It doesn't matter what your feeling is about, how right you are. That's the problem. That feeling, I am right. All right, that's the strong opinion, I am right. Gives a kind of charge to the ego, I, right. Necessarily, other people are wrong. You can't feel that way unless there are others that are wrong. And if you feel strongly enough that you're right, if you're certain enough that you're right, then you can argue and fight and even kill for your opinion. This isn't so far-fetched. On January 6th, there were a bunch of people who felt very, very strongly that President Trump should remain in the White House. They had a very strong opinion about this. So strong that they marched to Washington, D.C. and rioted and killed. If you think about it, it was just because they had a very strong opinion about who should be president. Whatever your feelings are about Trump, that's not the point. The point is strong opinions. You could blame it on Trump, you could blame it on QAnon, but behind those things, strong opinions are what drove those people to do what they did. And that's just one hot-button topic. There are many others about which people feel very strongly today. President Trump was a lightning rod for strong opinions. Either you love this man or you hated him. I never met a single person who said, you know, I just can't make up my mind about Trump. I never met anybody who said that. And there's others, you know, people feel very strongly about global warming. Of course, COVID is another subject of strong opinions. And I don't think it's difficult to see that a world full of people with strong opinions is a world of conflict and strife. And so we as spiritual aspirants, and I would say not just us, I would say even people who cultivate strong opinions, we would all, everyone, would like to see a better world. We all would. I think that is a universal desire. And so let's explore Swami Prabhavananda's advice on the alternative to the strong opinion. He advocates a prayerful attitude. And so I thought that I would say a few words about prayer in my experience as a Vedantist. In my mind, there are two kinds of prayer. There is the prayer induced by meditation, and then there's everything else. The prayer induced by meditation, what is that? This is something that for those of us who meditate regularly, you've probably had this experience, and for those who don't, it's not that hard to understand. You're trying to meditate, whatever that means. It means you're trying to focus your mind on a chosen ideal. It means you're trying to clear your mind, trying to empty your mind, trying to observe your mind, practice witness consciousness, trace the origin of your thoughts, whatever it is you're trying to do, whatever it is you call meditation. I think there's a universal experience we all have when we meditate. That is, we find a bunch of unwelcome thoughts arise in our minds. Whatever it is we're trying to do, there is a storm of thoughts in our mind. And we try to do whatever it is we try to do. Clear the mind, control the mind, focus the mind, all these things. And we find, for the most part, that we're not getting very far. This isn't working very well. And so after some struggle, however we struggle, we get so frustrated that we pray, Lord, please help me to control my, please help me to empty my mind, please help me to fill in my blank about the mind, whatever it is. Please help me. So we've gone to the shrine or wherever it is we go to meditate, not particularly to pray, really. We went there for a different kind of activity, and this prayer was induced by our meditation. That's just one example. So many others are there. You're trying to meditate, and, for example, you're worried about something. So maybe you have a test, maybe you have something at work, presentation, maybe there's somebody you have to meet you don't want to, or you want to influence them in a certain way, or maybe you just need to pay the rent. Whatever it is, something comes up in your mind again and again and again, right? You're worried about this thing in the shrine, right? You try and banish the thoughts, this particular thoughts, and you find that it's not going away. In fact, it may even seem to get worse. Sometimes you go to the shrine and you're trying to think of something and it actually gets worse in the shrine. It seems that way. And so you pray. What do you pray for? Well, there's some options. You could pray to do well on your test, do well at work, have some more money for the rent, influence this person that you want to influence the way you want to influence them. That's one option. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with it, but it leaves a kind of nagging question in your mind. Your sense of well-being, your sense of peace depends on an outcome if you pray that way. If you pray like this and you fail the test or you don't make rent or whatever, God has let you down. He didn't answer your prayer. If you do that enough times, if God lets you down enough times, you may start to think that God's a little deaf, or maybe he just doesn't care. Maybe he doesn't even exist, right? If, on the other hand, we could pray to be able to surrender whatever it is to the Lord, our higher power, whatever we pray to. Lord, I've done all I can for this test. I'd like to not think about this for a few minutes. I've done what I can. I'd like to not think about this for a few minutes and think about you instead. Afterwards, I'll go back and I'll worry about the test. I'll worry about the rent. I'll worry about whoever it is that I'm worried about. For now, please help me just for a few minutes to sit with you quietly. And help me to detach myself from this situation so that I can have trust in whatever outcome you determine for me. See, I think that's a better one. That's my opinion. Because now you're sort of free from the situation. Even if you can't stop thinking about it in the shrine, which frequently happens, it comes back and harasses you again. Still, you have made some effort to separate yourself a little bit from an outcome, which has the potential to make you miserable. So there's a variety of thoughts like this. You could go on and on about all the different kinds of thoughts. You're angry, you can't forgive someone. That's another one that happens in the shrine all the time. You don't even realize how angry you are with somebody until you get to the shrine and you try and meditate and you're furious with somebody and it keeps coming up and you don't want to be angry anymore. You just want to forgive them and you can't, right? So again, you're moved to pray for something in the shrine, right? The meditation that you've gone in to do is being thwarted by this thought. And so you're moved to pray for forgiveness. Dear Lord, please help me forgive this person. Of course, there are in the Bible and in the Chandi also in various scriptures you find people who pray for God to smite their enemies. Well, we don't advocate that one, but people do. But generally what you'd like to do, it's not fun to carry a grudge. Right? Who wants to carry a grudge? It doesn't make you happy. What makes you happy is to forgive, right? What you really want is not to be angry. It doesn't matter who's out there in the world. What you really want is to be free from anger. It's a burden. So that is what I would call the prayer induced by meditation, and it's very useful. It's very useful because once you see the kinds of prayers that arise in your meditation, it gives you an idea of the kinds of thoughts that are in your mind. You think, well, I already know that. No, you don't. Most people don't know most of their thoughts most of the time. But if you pray like this in the shrine, and then later on you think, gosh, I seem to be doing this a lot in the shrine, whatever it is, a greater awareness of our own thoughts and our own minds is the result. And that greater awareness of our thoughts gives us a better understanding of our minds. I would say that this is what is now called, it's kind of trendy parlance, mindfulness, being aware of your mind, right? This is mindfulness. And it is a natural byproduct of the prayer induced by meditation. Okay, so much for that. Now there's everything else. And I've had a problem, personally, with everything else. To illustrate the problem, I'm going to tell a story about a very senior devotee I know who lives in Arizona. He's well into his 80s by now. He told me many, many years ago about his daughter, who's a born-again Christian, fundamentalist. She was having a prayer meeting with her prayer group, and he came, attended the meeting, and they had a sick friend who couldn't make it to the meeting. And so they prayed for the sick friend. What did they pray for? Well, they prayed for the obvious thing. Dear God, please make so-and-so well. Heal them, right? So he thought this was absurd. He thought this was a completely silly prayer. And he said to me, who do you think made her sick in the first place? Right? See, for him, there was a conflict. Right? Because he saw everything happening by the will of God. That was his position as a Vedantist. For the daughter, there was no problem. Satan made the friend sick. God would make the friend well. It's a no-brainer. Right? Very simple. Well, I sympathize with him. I have also struggled with this over the years. Devotees get sick. They ask you to pray. What do you pray for? I mean, if you really believe that everything happens by the will of God and you pray for the sick person to become well, what are you saying? Maybe God just made a mistake when he gave this person the sickness. Maybe he wasn't paying attention. Maybe he just forgot. Maybe he missed. You know, he meant to hit the neighbor, right? But he just got the wrong address, you know? And so something like this, or, you know, maybe you just didn't think this one through, God. So it seems like a kind of criticism of the divine plan from a certain point of view. And, you know, probably most of us are not going to die in perfect health, which means that one of these sicknesses is going to kill us. Do you pray for life? That's clearly not going to work. You know, you can rationalize, not rationalize, you reason through, you try and think through, you try and make sense out of your prayer when everything happens by the will of God. And you find it very difficult. Try and pray for people to be free from pain. Right? That seems relatively safe. Can I pray for my friend to be out of pain? Okay, he's sick. Maybe he could at least be out of pain. My mom has chronic back pain, and I confess, I pray for her to be out of pain sometimes. Well, does pain have no lesson for us? Is pain useless? How do I know that what this person really needs is to be healthy or out of pain? How do I know that? What am I really saying here? Basically, again, it comes to a sort of critique of God's decision to give this person pain or sickness. And Swami Vivekananda says, point blank, that misery and pain are better teachers than happiness and prosperity. I have a quote here. He says, I dare say in the vast majority of cases it would be found that it was misery that taught more than happiness, it was poverty that taught more than wealth, it was blows that brought out inner fire more than praise. Basically, this is good for you. And Holy Mother goes even farther. Holy Mother says, everyone says regretfully, there's so much misery in the world. We have prayed so much to God, but still there is no end of misery. But misery is only the symbol of God's compassion. Misery is the gift of God. Straight out, this is what Holy Mother says. And it's not just Holy Mother, Jesus, blessed are ye when men shall revile you and say all manner of things against you falsely for my name's sake, right? Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. That's what he says, right? Rejoice, right? When you're a spiritual aspirant and you are miserable and suffering and full of pain, it's time to rejoice. That's the time to rejoice, okay? So you see that if you start praying for people to not have this pain and misery, well, then does that mean they don't get to rejoice either, right? I mean, there's a problem here. And you may not, this may be a lot to take on board if you haven't thought about this before, the idea that misery is actually good for you. And maybe you should pray for people to be more miserable. I mean, I'm not doing that. I'm not advocating that. But it follows the logic here, right? The logic is there. If this is going to be good for you and make you a better person, and we're all going to rejoice over our pain, well, we should pray for everybody to be in pain, right? In misery. They're better for us. So you may not accept these ideas. I admit, I've been thinking about them for a long time, and they are difficult to swallow. So if you don't accept them, I'm sympathetic. For the sake of argument, let's say that it's true. Okay? Let us say that misery and pain are better for us than happiness and prosperity. Well, who set it up that way? Who set the rules up that way? If you're going to make a universe and you're going to have a bunch of creatures, and you're going to ordain that they grow along spiritual lines, they evolve spiritually, and they get closer to you and eventually achieve enlightenment and experience union with you in this blissful love, why make the vehicle for that pain and misery? Why not make it something fun? Right? Donuts. Jelly donuts, right? The more jelly donuts you eat, actually I like apple fritters. The more apple fritters you eat, the more spiritual, and why not? The more spiritual, the more intelligent, and the healthier you are, right? All of it. Why not pray for that? It's basically a different universe. That's not the one we live in. And so this is the kind of prayer that I call everything else. And you can go down this logic with all kinds. You know, the peace chant. There's another one, right? We do the peace chant here. I do it myself, daily, multiple times a day. And yet, I mean, in the last analysis, you think, okay, you know, may all beings be blissful, may all beings be happy. Where did the strife come from? I mean, in the last analysis, it came from God. If everything happens by the will of God, well, that's where the strife came from too. And so, what are you saying? You're saying, gee, Lord, couldn't you have made a better world, one with less strife and more peace? I mean, did you think about this? Maybe you should try again. You know, from a certain point of view, you could basically, you're saying, Lord, this thing where misery makes us more spiritual and everybody's struggling with each other, this world sucks. In so many words, that's what I'm saying with my prayer. This world sucks. If you think I'm being flippant, Swami Vivekananda says something. I'm grateful to my brother, Swami Mahayogananda, for giving me this reference. I couldn't find it. Swami Vivekananda says, "What a humbug and illusion this world is, Mother. What a mockery this life. I pray constantly that all mankind will come to know the reality, that is God. And this shop will be closed forever." This shop is this world. Basically, and like I said, in so many worlds, this world sucks. Let's just shut this thing down and go do something else. That's basically what he's saying, right? Let's try again somewhere else, some other paradigm, the donut world or whatever, right? So these are the two kinds of prayer in my mind. There's the prayer induced by meditation, which for me has always been pretty straightforward. You know, something happens in the shrine and you pray for it. Yeah, whatever it is, you know, make it go away. It's bothering me. Pray for it. And they're not all self-centered. You could be bothered by compassion for someone. Someone's sick and suffering in the shrine. You think, gee, so-and-so is really going through it and I can't get him out of my mind. And you pray for that person, right? Very, very simple. The problem is that when the difference between these two, I would say for me, is that in one case the heart is moved to prayer. And in the other case, it's this kind of intellectual exercise, and a sort of quality control mechanism shows up and spoils and foils all of my prayers, right? You know, well, have you really thought about what this prayer means? Do you really think this person needs this thing that you're praying for? Are you sure that you know what you're talking about here? You know, these kinds of questions arise in my mind. If I'm in the shrine and something's bothering me, the heart just erupts in a prayer, you know? The frustration or the anger or the compassion or whatever the motivation is pushes me to pray, and I don't have to think. It's just pray, okay. And of course, when my mind is really a mess, these two worlds collide. They're not obviously watertight compartments, I'd say. And this happened to me a few weeks ago. I think probably most of you know, not everybody, of course. I live in the Mojave Desert with my mom, who's a quadriplegic. We're out there all alone. And so this is several weeks ago, late at night. Mom is, you know what it means to be a quadriplegic, I'm sure, and at the same time, I'm sure that probably none of you know what it really means to be a quadriplegic. To be a quadriplegic from, 1,000 miles away, yeah, it's frustrating, it's painful, it's limiting, it's all those things. But it's, you just don't know what you take for granted until it's gone, you know? You don't realize the things that you do. I mean, there are things you can't do that you didn't even know you did before. And you're humiliated. You're reduced to the state of a child. You have to ask for help for all these things that you just think, and I know she's in there, she's thinking, I don't want to bug him again for whatever it is, you know? You've got no choice. You have been put in this situation where you have no choice but to ask for help for things that just you find so humiliating. There's really no other word for it. And you never get a break. You know, people with chronic pain, maybe they get a day off or an hour off, some time off. Not this. Every second of every day it's there for you. It's not like you get an hour where you get to walk. No. All the time, 24/7. Anyway, I can't really do it justice in words. You really have to live with a quadriplegic or, God forbid, become one to understand what it is. Anyway, so, okay, enough of that. It's late at night, middle of the night. Mom is suffering in bed, and I get her out of bed, and I take her into the bathroom, where she continues to suffer. And the situation is worse than usual. And, being her son, there's only so much help I can give her in the bathroom. She's going to have to make this, somehow get out of this situation on her own, because it's the middle of the night, and we're in the Mojave Desert. And so there's really nothing for me to do but pray at this point. That's it. I could sit there and actively not pray, right, and do something else, look at my phone, I guess. But, it's, I don't know, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I think it was 2 o'clock. I don't remember. I'm not going to start up some crossword puzzle. And so really the only thing to do is to pray. And this is one of those situations where both these worlds just collide, right? Because the heart is moved to prayer and the mind is policing it like crazy, And I pray for the obvious, stupid thing. I pray for just the simplest, dumbest thing. I say, Lord, please help my mom get off the toilet and back to bed. Just help my mom out of this jam that she's in, And of course, the prayer police come in and they say, what, do you think he doesn't know where she is? Do you think he forgot her? Do you think he doesn't know everything that's going on tonight? What do you think? He's asleep? No, of course I don't think any of those things, but I can't help it, right? The prayer just goes bleh, out, you know? And the thought police come back and, well, I mean, do you think that you care about your mother more than God does? So you have to ask him for help because he doesn't care enough about her? So he does know, but he doesn't care enough about her, so he needs you to ask him to help her, because otherwise he just wouldn't get off the dime, right? No, of course I don't think, and so I know that these prayers are stupid right there in real time. I'm like, gosh, this is just dumb. And I apologize in the middle of my prayers for making such dumb prayers. But that's where I am. What am I going to do? I mean, that's what's coming out, okay? And it's very frustrating, obviously, maybe. Anyway, I think it was the next couple of days, I found a similar situation that was experienced by a great saint. See, it's always, and she had a similar problem to me. This is always very encouraging to me when I find a great saint who has my problem. I feel like this is why so many people love Girish Ghosh, you know, because all these other guys are perfect, right? But Girish Ghosh, you go, haha, that guy I can relate to. And if he can do it, if he can be a great spiritual, you know, by the end of his life, he was this great illumined soul, there's hope for me, right? There's hope for me. That's the thoughts, right? So I find this situation that's similar in the life of a great saint. And I think, yes, there's hope for me, right? So it's Nivedita, Sister Nivedita. And she's gone to Dakshineswar to pray for her friend Sarah Bull. Sarah Bull, both these people, for those of you who don't know, they are some of Swami Vivekananda's most intimate Western disciples when he came to this country. They're great spiritual people. Swami Vivekananda actually had so much respect and admiration for Sarah Bull that, I don't know if this is commonly known, she was actually suggested as one of the initial 3 trustees for Bellarmine. It was Brahmananda, Saradananda, and Sarah Bull. They were supposed to be the first 3 trustees of Bellarmine. That didn't go over too well. But anyway, that gives you an idea of his opinion of Sarah Bull. She's a great soul. And of course, so is Nivedita. She did so much work in India. You know, Swamiji's arguably one of his best Western workers in India, maybe not even arguably. Sister Christine also did a lot. Anyway, they're great souls. And so what happens? Nivedita goes to Dakshineswar, and she's going to pray for Sarah Bull, who's going through a difficult period in her life. And see, unlike me, when I go through this with my mom and I pray for her, I have to invent God's response. You know, in my mind, I think, well, what do you think God's doing? And this isn't God that, and wouldn't God say this or that, right? But if you're Nivedita, God just talks to you. He takes up the other side of the conversation and just tells you the position that you're in and that he's in. So she prays for Sarah Bull. Just like I said in the beginning, you pray for a devotee to not be sick or to be out of pain or whatever. She's doing that for Sarah Bull. And so the Lord speaks to her, and he says, "Have you yet to learn that this love that speaks in your heart is not yours, but mine?" In other words, just what I thought with my mom. Do you really think that you love your mom more than God does? Right? That's basically the same point here. He says, "Must you struggle and plead with me for my own? Don't you think I know who Sarah Bull is?" Right? Nivedita is praying for Sarah Bull, and he says, "Must ye struggle and plead with me for my own?" She's mine, not yours. Just like my mom is God's child first, my mom second, right? And here's another one that we already talked about. "Know ye not that difficulties and discouragements but point out the way in which I would guide you?" We're back to misery is good for us, but this is a little bit better because it at least tells us a little bit why. You are being guided. You know, you've gone astray this way or that way, and it could be very subtle. We don't know why. It's hard to see. But anyway, this is the explanation. Again, it may be hard to swallow, okay? But that's the answer. Difficulties and discouragements, but point out the way in which I would guide you, okay? So in answer to Nivedita's prayer, God confirms, yes, of course he knows what Sarah Bull is going through. He knows what my mom is going through. Yes, of course he cares about it. Yes, of course it's more than you care about it. Of course all these things, right? And I'm sure that Nivedita had thought this stuff through, just like I have. She got the benefit of an actual vision of God to tell her this, where I had to invent it on my own. But nevertheless, I'm sure she'd already thought about this stuff. And this is what happens here is there's a basic conflict between the heart and the mind, right? The heart yearns for something. It just wants your mom to be okay. It doesn't know how to make sense out of that. And the mind comes in and says, this doesn't make any sense, right? This conflict between the heart and the mind, even Sri Ramakrishna seems to have had, I say seems to because you never know these things, but it seems like he had a similar situation. His mother died. Sri Ramakrishna's mother died, and he wept, mother, mother. He cried for his mother. And Hridoy is there and says, uncle, you're a monk. How can you cry for your mother, right? And Sri Ramakrishna, because that's not the monk's ideal, right? What does Swami Vivekananda say? They know not truth who dream such vacant dreams as father, mother, children, wife, and friend, the sexless self. Whose father he, whose child, whose friend, whose foe is he who is but one, right? The self is all in all, and thou art that, sannyasin bold, right? The song of the sannyasin, the monk. You are the sexless self. You don't have any of these things, mother, father, all this stuff. This is all Maya, right? So Hridoy reminds Sri Ramakrishna of his monastic ideal. You're not supposed to cry for your mother. What does Sri Ramakrishna say? Well, in this translation, he says, keep quiet, you rascal. I can imagine it might have been, shut up, you jerk. But anyway, keep quiet, you rascal. We'll stick with that. Keep quiet, you rascal. I may have become a monk, but that does not mean I am a heartless beast. Okay. So, we can sympathize. He is following the call of the heart. Yes, of course, he loves his mother. Nevertheless, Hridoy's got a point. You can't help but admit it. Hridoy's got a point. The monastic ideal, here it is. Sri Ramakrishna knows that, just like Nivedita knew her thing, her prayer, and, got the answer anyway. And he completely rejects it. Right? He rejects that and says, yeah, well, I have a heart and I'm going with the heart. Nivedita did the same thing. I think in my way I also did. Even though I didn't like my prayers, there was really no choice. I really didn't have a choice at the time. And does that mean that you always go with the heart instead of the mind? I don't know. Tough to generalize. Situations are so varied. People are so varied. I wouldn't say that. That's how it seems this time with these three examples. But I think situations are so different, it's hard to say. Anyway, so what happened to me that night? Eventually, seemingly after forever, it's time to take Mom back to bed. And so I do. And I tell her, as I'm putting her to bed, I say, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry you got to go through this, I don't know what else to say. And she looks at me, and there is just no problem on her face. It's just clear skies. She is full of joy and full of love. And she told me that she spent the whole time in the bathroom filled with gratitude, filled with devotion. That's what she said. What exactly do you have to be grateful for in that situation? It really knocked the wind out of me. Given the situation she's in, the only thing that I can imagine you could possibly be grateful for in that situation is a sense of God's presence. There's really nothing else. I don't see anything else that is going to lift you above that. You have to feel some of God's joy, love, presence. You have to, because I just don't think there's nothing concrete to say, well, I'm grateful that it could be worse. You know, that's what well, it could be worse. Be grateful because it could be worse. It could always be worse. No matter how bad it gets, it could always be worse. It's one of the amazing things of this planet, you know? And so to be eternally grateful because it isn't worse, it's just not practical to me. So that, and you know, the thought that it could be worse isn't going to fill you, isn't going to light you up like she was when I put her to bed. That doesn't do that, doesn't have that effect. That keeps you from committing suicide is what that does, but it doesn't lift you up. She was elevated, and I was struck dumb, you know, because what happened? I did the stupid prayer, and God answered the prayer that I should have asked for. That's what happened. What I should have asked for is exactly what happened. Please lift us both above this, Lord. You know, let us both rise above this physical frame and its unavoidable limitations, irritations, frustrations, all these things, right? And how? Through a sense of your presence. That's the prayer I should have asked for, right? But I didn't. I just did the dumb, please get her back to bed. That was my prayer, right? You know, and I know better. I know better. And yet still, that's what came out. So the next morning, after I was, you know, it was all over, I woke up and I thought about all these things in my mind, and I thought, you know, that would make a really good Sunday talk. And then I thought, you know what, I don't really talk anymore. I used to speak in Trabuco, but I don't anymore, really, since I left and went to the desert. And it's really, sorry, Mom, it's kind of personal. You know, it's a little bit close to the bone, you know, maybe don't do that on Sunday. So I just let it go. Okay, not going to talk about it. And I think it was later that day, maybe it was the next day, I don't remember now, where I got the request from Hollywood to come and speak, and I thought, well, okay, I guess that's what I'm going to talk about. And then, so at this point, you might wonder, well, where did you get the title, right? Because it doesn't really have much to do. Actually, I mean, the prayerful attitude, it seems to me I have communicated sort of by anecdotes here, but I haven't really explicitly gone into it so much. So I think to bring it back to Swami Prabhavananda's prayerful attitude, probably the most salient feature in my mind about prayer is that if you think about it enough, it just doesn't make sense. It's not going to make sense, okay? And contrast that with the strong opinion, right? The attitude of the strong opinion. And the strong opinion, it all makes sense, perfect sense, because you know that you're right. I know that I'm right, which means I've figured this all out. I know it all. I've got it all nailed down, right? It all makes perfect sense. Otherwise, I wouldn't be so sure of myself, right? So, as I said in the beginning, I think both factions, the faction of people who cultivate strong opinions and the faction of people who cultivate the attitude of prayer, and you are cultivating a strong opinion. It's not just, it doesn't just rain in from the sky. You nurse it and let it grow and fester. Right? Those people that went to the Capitol on January 6th, they didn't just decide that morning to do that. Maybe they did, but that was after weeks of building resentments because they knew who should be president, right? They knew. They had it all figured out, They were exactly right, and they knew. And it got stronger and stronger in their minds. The opinion got stronger and stronger for weeks, till finally they marched or drove or flew or whatever to Washington, D.C. and did what they did. So that was cultivated, basically by what I said in the beginning, not being aware of your thoughts, not being mindful, not watching your mind, right? That's the big advantage to knowing your own thoughts. You catch these things, you say, hey, cool it, right? So, but back to the point. Both these factions, the group of people who are cultivating strong opinions and those who are cultivating the prayerful attitude, we both want the better world, like I mentioned in the beginning. Everyone wants the better world. We all agree on that. No one wants the world to be worse. The difference is that the people with the strong opinions want to make the world better by forcing everyone else to shift their viewpoint to their opinion, right? That's how they're going to make the world a better place. And all the people that don't agree with them should be either argued with or removed, however you do that, out of the way, right? And all the people with the right opinion, which is of course my opinion, will run the show, right? And we'll have a better world. Now, okay, that seems, obviously that's not going to work, right? Forget it. It's not realistic, okay? But the goal is there. Now, okay, what about the people with the prayerful attitude? How are they hoping for a better world? See, prayer is really just a kind of bhakti yoga. That's what we're talking about here. It's a kind of bhakti yoga. There's other kinds, but this is, this emotional connection with God, right? That's prayer. And the idea of yoga is to see the better world that already exists, right? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to see the better world that already is. And you say, okay, but that's not really making the world any better. That's just shifting your viewpoints. But no, it's not quite that simple, right? Because these things are contagious. Just when someone comes at you with a strong opinion, they hit you with their strong opinion, what do you feel? You feel like coming back at them with a strong opinion. It's evoked from you, right? Even if you didn't feel strongly about it. Well, this person's shouting and red in the face, and so I'm going to say something, right? And you find the same thing when you do it to somebody else. You're all flustered about something, and you approach somebody, and you find that they're getting flustered too, right? And they're coming back at you with their emotional response. And so strong opinions are kind of a virus that's spread, right? And the same thing is true with prayer. How does that work? Take the peace prayer that I talked about in the beginning. I said it didn't make any sense, right? Because where did the strife come from? And God, shouldn't you have made a more peaceful world? And what's wrong with you, right? Nevertheless, the peace prayer is something we all do. We all practice. I do it too. Why? Because if you do this, if you make an effort, and when I mean make an effort, I don't mean say, oh Lord, please make the world better. Please make the world more peaceful. No. To actually try, when you sit down to meditate, and visualize lights coming out of your heart, going out in all directions, to all people, to all the plants, to all the pets, to everything. In all directions. Light, love, happiness, joy, flowing outward to all. Imagine it. Swamiji says first go north, then go south, then go east, then go west. Imagine this healing lights in all these directions. And try and feel happiness and joy emanating out of you and going out into all these corners of the world. Now, if you do that, it doesn't matter if it makes sense. If you do that several times a day, as many of you already do, I know, and already know that this works, it has an effect. Yes, it shifts your consciousness. You feel more sympathy, more love for everyone, for the people, the pets and the plants, all of them. And just like when someone comes at you with a strong opinion, and you feel a strong opinion coming out of you, you've had this experience, someone comes at you and they're full of love and sympathy, well, that evokes a very different response from you, right? You don't have a strong opinion anymore. Now you're feeling some love and sympathy as well. And the same thing if, I know that I'm preaching to the choir here. These people have devoted their lives to this practice. Nevertheless, it's worth saying that if you make a regular practice of praying for the welfare and the peace of all beings, especially the people that you don't like, especially pray for the people that you don't like. Try and imagine them happy and full of love. You will expand in sympathy and love. If you make a regular practice out of that, and even in 6 months, you'll realize some shift in your consciousness. Probably less time than that, I would say. And so it's not just about changing your perspective. You're not just making the world a better place by living in some la-la land where it's all butterflies and daffodils, right? You are having an effect. There is a sort of nearest neighbor interaction between you and the people you connect with, and it translates around. And according to Vedanta, if we can perfectly get in tune, perfectly sympathize with all beings, feel that love and sympathy completely with all, then we will realize sarvam kalvidam Brahman. All this is verily Brahman, right? This world is perfect now. The Lord is everywhere and always perfect, as it says in the Bhagavad Gita. So the idea in Vedanta is, if you reform yourself, the world will stand reformed. May the good Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May he lift his countenance upon you and bring you peace. May good betide all. May happiness come to all. May all see the face of truth. And be fortified with the armor of love, goodwill, joy, and understanding. Peace, peace, peace be unto us all. So there's some questions, and I have Swami Mahayogananda's iPhone here, where I'm trying to thumb through. And okay, here's one. Here's the question. Since you've specifically distinguished activity of mind from heart, did you by any chance ask your mother what her mind was specifically focused on? I don't think I quite framed the question that way, but I did ask her how she could possibly be grateful in such a situation. And yeah, she confirmed what I said, which is that she was filled with I don't know, filled is a big word. She had a sense of you know, how do you put that in words? I don't know. She had a sense of love and joy and gratitude and divine presence, you know, grace. How do you put grace into words? I don't know. But yeah, I didn't make that up. That was her experience. You know, I can't, you know, how can you, well, Sri Ramakrishna gives the example of well, not peanut butter. I'm giving the example of peanut butter. How do you explain to somebody what peanut butter tastes like? You know, you can't. You just hand them a jar of peanut butter. I mean, you can't really say, oh, it tastes like what? What does it taste like? It's peanut butter. Nothing else tastes like peanut butter, right? And you can't explain peanut butter. You just have to eat some. So yes, she had that experience, and no, I can't really explain it. Sorry. Let's see. Is that it? I think that's the only one. Okay. Well, I'm glad not everyone was asleep. Okay.
We thank Swami Arupeshananda for coming from Piñon Hills, our retreat center in Piñon Hills, to Hollywood to share his beautiful reflections with us, very touching and very bold to speak, also because his mother is also here. And we're feeling very touched to hear about her experience and your experience. And to share that with all of you who are joining us remotely also. And next week there will be a talk, most likely, Swami Sarvadevananda, though we have not been provided with a schedule yet. So every week we have a talk. We have classes on Tuesdays at 4:30, Narada's Way of Divine Love, 7:30, Shanti Gita with Swami Sarvadevananda. Wednesday, Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna with Swami Sarvadevananda. Thursday, 7:30 p.m., Bhagavad Gita with Swami Satyamayananda. Friday, reading from Swami Abhedananda with Swami Atmavedyananda and Atma. Saturday mornings, meditation class with Swami Satyamayananda, and Sunday mornings at 11, a talk. So our arati is every evening at 6 p.m. And I think that's it. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.